Jag står här på Kungliga Vetenskapsakademin i Frescati-området med Daron Acemoglu, en av 3 ekonomipristagare. First of all, congratulations and welcome to Sweden. I want to talk about your research and what you're awarded for, but there's been a lot of talk about AI, obviously, and I want to start on an optimistic note. How can AI be a force of good when it comes to economic opportunity and inclusion?
I am not an AI optimist, but I think AI has tremendous potential, and it has potential as an information technology, meaning that we live in a world in which information is abundant, but useful information, the kind of information that you need to perform better tasks, to solve problems. As a white-collar worker, blue-collar worker, as a journalist, as an academic, that kind of useful information is scarce. And AI can be a very powerful tool for providing us real-time useful information to do our jobs better. We can be a much better journalist, electrician, plumber with the right kind of information. And it is that potential of AI that could be both economically enriching, socially beneficial, and actually lead to higher wages and higher productivity for workers.
And can we talk a little bit about the risks and the downsides as well?
Well, the risks and the downsides, in my opinion, are that we're not really going in that direction. We are more likely to get the bad of AI than the good of AI because AI is a very versatile technology. If you have information in your hands, you can use it for good or for bad. You can use it to provide that information to people so that they become empowered, or you can use it to control people. It could be political control, social control, it could be economic control. And I think that sort of control, especially when the technology is concentrated in the hands of really a very, very, very small number of people in just 1 or 2 countries, that's really concerning.
So if you would give the world some good advice on AI, what should be done to make this go in the right direction?
Well, I mean, I think we live in a modern world that's shaped by democracy as much as anything else. I don't think today we would be in the place we are in many countries, unfortunately not all, but in many countries where people are prosperous, people have access to social safety nets, people have a voice, is because of democracy. Okay, fine, democracy is going through a rough patch, but I think the achievements of democracy should not be understated. And democracy means that people have a voice in most things. And I think if AI is really a transformative technology that's going to affect every aspect of our lives, that means that we do need some degree of democratic control over AI. It's not the decision of just 1 or 2 people in some corner of the world, but it's people's voice and wishes of how AI should be used. Should AI be used more for eliminating jobs, or can we find a way of using AI for creating jobs and creating higher wages? Should AI be used for monitoring and manipulating people, or is there a way to use AI and develop AI technologies so that people are more empowered in their social as well as political interactions?
If we leave AI and go to the prize that you're actually awarded, it's a lot about historical research, why some countries prosper and some don't. Could you give me the very brief elevator pitch of your findings and your best advice for today?
Well, I hinted at some of this in the discussion of democracy. Our research is focused on the effects of institutions. Of course, there are other factors that matter, but our findings indicate, and my belief is that this is fundamentally correct, that institutional differences, meaning how we organize our society, who holds political power, whether there is equality before the law, whether people have incentives, property rights, opportunities, those are the fundamental determinants of how much a country, how much a society prospers. It's not easy to build better institutions, and it is a continuously changing dynamic event. What are the right institutions? What are the right regulations? Of course, are going to be very different in a world shaped by AI than they were, for example, in the 1940s or 1950s. But nevertheless, in this continuous struggle to build better institutions, there is no alternative but try to kind of move towards institutions that are more participatory and more encouraging to economic flourishing, which is what we call inclusive institutions. So these institutional differences, I think, are what my research focuses on, and it's a multifaceted research. A lot of my work is theoretical, a lot of it is historical, a lot of it is statistical, but they are they are all pointing in the same direction, that these institutional differences are important, and they are not trivial, meaning that there are both huge differences across countries in terms of institutions, and also they're not trivial in the sense that institutions are not an engineering problem. You cannot just choose institutions. It's a really social process, organic process that leads to the development of institutions.
And what would you say to Montesquieu, for example, or the notion that it's all about being north, south, or far from the equator?
Well, Montesquieu, of course, was a very, very interesting philosopher. He's the sort of godfather of separation of powers and checks and balances. But he also thought that geographic differences were hugely important. The heat of the climate would determine whether a country could flourish. And he also thought that his theory of separation of powers should only apply to people who were in cold climates, not to those who deserve to be ruled by despots. A lot of the work that we do, in some sense, shows that geographic differences are quite secondary. Of course, geography matters. You cannot grow wheat on the Antarctic, but humans are hugely adaptable. They have managed to work and live productively in many different climates. And if you go back to the 1500s, many of the countries that today are said to be subject to geographic disadvantages because of the heat of the climate or other problems, they were much more prosperous than the more temperate favored areas. So in the New World, for example, the more advanced civilizations were pretty close to the semi-tropics. They were in Mexico Valley, they were in what is Bolivia and Peru, or Central America today, and North America, Canada. Those were pretty sparsely settled and not anywhere as advanced. So it's not as if like geography was destiny then, and geography is not destiny now.
How are we doing now? I mean, America is getting more and more divided in terms of economic opportunity, but in many poor countries, a lot of people are lifted out of poverty as well. Is this a good time or a bad time?
Well, I mean, in some ways, the last 250 years have been a great time. If you look at people who lived in the middle of the 18th century, they were generally poor. They lived difficult lives, short lives, unhealthy, very bad accommodations in general. So overall, we are so much more comfortable, so much healthier, so much more prosperous than those people who lived then. But also we live in a much, much more unequal world. The rich and poor were divided by a small gap in the 1750s. Today, the millionaires, billionaires, are hundreds of thousands of times richer than some of the poorer people. Even when you aggregate that into countries, some of the richest countries are 70 times per capita more prosperous than some of the poorest countries. That's an incredible gap. And that's a gap created by the fact that some countries took advantage of technologies and some didn't as much. Some countries have much, much better health than others. Some countries have much, much better comfort and voice and security than others. And those are the fundamental inequalities that we're grappling with in the world today.
And is it possible to address those to improve without a dramatic seismal shift like a war or a plague or something?
I absolutely believe that it is possible to do better, because at the end of the day, once you say it's not geography, it's not some sort of immutable national culture, it is the choices that we make collectively in building our institutions, the organization of our lives, how we use technology. Those are the things that have propelled some countries into greater prosperity and held back others. But it's not an easy problem. Again, I come back to the same thing. It's not like we're going to send troops or experts to a country and engineer better institutions or, set up democracy there. It has to be an organic process, a bottom-up process. But there are myriad lessons from history and from social science that can help us in understand where are the threats coming from, what are the pitfalls, and what is the broad direction that we should be moving into.
Finally, this prize is obviously good for you and a wonderful thing. Is it meaningful in achieving the goals that we just discussed, in bringing inequalities down?
Well, first of all, it's wonderful for me and my colleagues, but it is, first of all, recognizing a work that was collective work by dozens of other people working in, so that's wonderful. But I think it is also very meaningful in a different sense. You mentioned AI. That's just one of the many other transformative events we are living through. Climate change, aging populations, changing global power balance. All of these are great threats and great opportunities for remaking our society. All of them require public responses. Strong institutions are key. Institutions that can act as a framework for building social consensus, how to deal with climate change, how to deal with an aging population, how to regulate AI, which we must do. Those really are institutional problems. And by bringing the spotlight on institutions, I hope this prize will propel us towards questioning those institutions, understanding those institutions, and perhaps put some more effort in building towards better institutions, better democracy.
Thank you very much, and I hope so too.
Thank you.